At some point in our lives, we will all experience the death of a loved one. If you or someone you know is experiencing the grief that comes with losing someone you love, then I have a life-changing experience to offer you. If you could connect with your loved one through a medium and talk to them one more time, would you like that opportunity? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then I would like to give you access to the 2019 Afterlife Awareness Conference livestream. This event is happening June 6th through 9th in Salt Lake City, Utah, but we are bringing it to the comfort of your own home with our livestream access. We have an early bird special that ends April 15th, 2019 for only $99. Over 25 hours of education about the afterlife, near-death experiences, how other cultures grieve, and information in ways on how you can heal the grief within. For your access to this amazing content, visit path11productions.com and get your access before the price goes up to $129. If your wallet is a little tight this month, no problem, we got you covered. We also offer a payment plan that makes it easy to pay for your live stream access. Take the step to heal your grief and give yourself the gift of healing today. And thanks for tuning in to the Path 11 podcast. I am your host, April Hanna. At the Path 11 podcast, we are here trying to deliver leading-edge research on consciousness, healing, and metaphysics. And just like you, we are trying to answer the big questions about life. Who are we? Why are we here? And what is our purpose? We hope by listening to our podcast, it will make each day you live on Earth a little easier to understand. And now for today's podcast. All right, everyone, I would like to bring our guest on our show today. We are going to be talking about UFOs and a documentary that documents a true story of a man whose name you might be familiar with, Travis Walton. And our guest today is Jennifer Stein. She is a self-taught filmmaker who never went to film school. She is an entrepreneur who started making films in the 1990s while running nonprofit organizations, raising her 2 children, and running a special events business. Harnessing the power of the moving visual image to educate, inspire, and empower, Jennifer uses film to help achieve her goals, to further important causes, and help open people's awareness to important issues. Jennifer has a strong interest in the UFO phenomenon, crop circles, and ancient archaeology. The result is a powerful combination of community leadership and purposeful filmmaking. Jennifer likes to collaborate with other filmmakers and learns from all of them. Jennifer's film website is On Wings Production and provides a sampling of her past productions and award-winning documentary films. And today we will be discussing her most recent project, Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. Jennifer, welcome to our show.
Thank you, April. Thank you for having me on.
Yes. Now, I have to say that I am just starting to delve into the UFO phenomena. My focus has always been more on healing and psychology, and more, I would say, more in this past year or so, we've had some more guests on that are talking more about it, educating me on it, and I was not born yet when this happened to Travis Walton, so this was actually the first time I have ever heard of his name. So I learned so much watching the documentary, and I love the fact that you are a self-taught filmmaker who never went to film school, because either did I. And, I was kind of just teaching myself with Mike's, help and assistance when we were making our documentary films. I came more from the mental health background, and your work was beautifully done. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a very, very great documentary. So I'm really excited to talk about it today. But can you give us a little more background just on yourself and what led you to being so curious about the UFO phenomena?
Well, April, I'm an experiencer myself. In fact, the same year, 1975, I had a pretty close encounter with what I will describe as an odd rectangle of white light that was less than 500 feet outside a bedroom window at like 5:30 in the morning, waking me up. And it's one of those very odd things that stays in my memory. I was 19 years old at the time. I didn't know a thing about the UFO phenomenon. I was experiencing and experimenting, I would say, with consciousness and meditation. and healing and reading things like Edgar Cayce's work. So I was open-minded, but still terribly confused. And the event stayed in my gray box for about 45 years. I'm sorry, not 40 years, for about 25 years, until I could really get a handle on possibly what I experienced. And so I was kind of primed or ready when I turned 45 and realized I wasn't alone at that time in my life. There was someone else in my house who saw everything I saw. And when I realized that, and I realized that what I saw was probably a real thing, even though I couldn't really fully wrap my brain around it or describe it, then I realized that I wasn't alone, that these odd things that can happen, and that we're probably not alone in the universe, and there are other dimensional interfaces that take place from time to time. And I think that's kind of what gave me the courage to step into this field when I was about 45, which was about almost, I'm 60 now, so that was about 25 years ago. And I've just continued to learn and read and go to conferences. And so I started to befriend different authors whom I got to know in the field, and I started to help them with projects. I've also done a project about Betty and Barney Hill with Kathy Marden. That's a very famous UFO case from 1961 in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. So it's been a gradual, a process for me, but certainly a worthwhile one because I'm learning the whole time I'm doing these things.
Now, what compelled you to want to tell the story about Travis Walton?
Well, believe it or not, Travis's name is known worldwide for people who study the UFO phenomenon. And there was a very famous Paramount picture made in 1993 called Fire in the Sky. It's actually the same title of Travis's book called Fire in the Sky, which he wrote, which is about a 400-page book. But most people don't read these days, especially younger generations. Not to discredit them in any way, but many of them live their lives in short sound bites and in film. And they don't really take the time to read a 400-page or 500-page book to understand specific details about an event. So most people were, basing their understanding of Travis's story from this Hollywood film, which had fictionalized parts of the story. It wasn't a documentary film. They didn't try to stick to the real facts of the story. And I felt that was a great opportunity because many of the crew members that he was working with, there was a logging crew in the forest, and many of those crew members were still alive. And at the time, the police sheriffs and deputies who were involved were still alive. Now some of them have passed away. The polygraph expert from the state of Arizona who was involved in giving these men polygraph, he was alive. So it was really a great way to go back and unpack this story. And as a filmmaker, I thought it was a great challenge. So that was one of my main motivations, is to tell the true story rather than the Hollywoodized version, because there were some pretty significant differences. And also, it's a real way to understand who Travis is and what he went through. I took it as a personal look into Travis's life. And one of the other major reasons we did it is Peter Robbins and I were both involved in attempting to help Travis organize a conference around his event, because in many parts of the country where significant UFO events have taken place, like Roswell, New Mexico, or say McMinnville in I think that's in Oregon, there have been now UFO events which have sprung up at our annual events. There are some down in the Gulf Breeze area in Tampa, Florida. And there are some, like in Exeter, New Hampshire, where other significant UFO events have taken place. So it's kind of become a phenomenon, and it can actually make a huge economic impact on a small town like Travis is from. So we started out helping him to sort of coaching him to organize a conference. And the film was going to be part of the central focus of the conference. We could use the film, show the film as part of the conference, especially for the 40th anniversary, which the film was made for. So there were these combination of influences that kind of came together. And I was lucky enough to get Travis to trust me to work with him. And kind of the rest is history.
Yeah, I know, watching it from, a perspective of definitely wanting to believe and do believe in some of this stuff. And then also a little bit of being kind of like that open-minded skeptic. One of the things that I found, I think, really compelling was the section in the documentary about the polygraph test and, where 5 of these men were being tested and really like the statistical chance of all of them passing, after witnessing an event like this. Like so many people wanted to debunk and, try to find something within the polygraph to say, well, this isn't, a very great testing tool, but I know that you had one of the experts that was administering the test, but to have that percentage to be so high where they all passed it, I think that lended a lot of credibility to the men's stories. I mean, and overall, when you're really watching them as the audience member, as the viewer, I mean, you could see the compassion in the way that they're telling the story that this really happened. Like this was their experience. There's no reason for them to make something up. And I think the documentary also shows very much of the pain that these men went through as a result of being connected, to Travis and witnessing this. And who would want to make something up? And, the one guy had to leave town, ended up leaving town, and just all of the other stuff that Travis went through with losing his job and the way that the community looked at them. Like there was nothing for them to benefit for having this testimonial of what happened and lie about it.
Yes, April, you are absolutely right. And that's one of the major reasons I wanted to make the film, is to really tell their story, because this event ruined their lives.
Yeah.
It really did. It closed a lot of doors for them. These were all boys from a Mormon community. Snowflake, Arizona is a Mormon town. So there isn't a lot of, everyone in the town knows each other. There isn't a lot of room for shenanigans. If you steal somebody's car, they're going to know about it,
Right.
And so if you make up a story like this that involves the whole town and several other towns helping the police force look for these, the missing boy, which was Travis. He was missing for 5 days. So there were over 500 people, at least 100 people every day out looking for him.
Yeah.
And that lasted for 5 days.
Right. That was the other compelling part to me, right? If I'm trying to explain, well, what's the possibility of him being missing? These men left the scene for a period of time, then they came back and he was gone. But then the search crew, they brought in the dogs, the helicopters, even if he had stumbled somewhere and wasn't taken up by a craft, it still doesn't quite explain him missing for these 5 days,
Right. The hounds would have found his tracks.
Right.
If he'd gotten up and walked away.
Right.
And hidden under a log somewhere, which he really couldn't do because it was too cold in the forest. He would have frozen to death at night. That high up, it's set, the elevation is about 7,000 feet where they were working on this rim called the Mogollon Rim. So in November at night, it's like well below 32 degrees up there. So over 5 days, he would have frozen to death or been eaten by a bear or a coyote or, a moose or something. It's not a hospital area to be in. It's very unhospitable, for someone to be out in the forest at night like that.
Right. And the other thing too that struck me was, like a little bit of longitudinal data, of after all of these years have gone by and the way that the trees grew in the specific area of where the craft was and how they studied that. To me, there was something there as well that made me say, okay,
Yes.
that's interesting.
Isn't that interesting? So I can explain a little bit of that for your listeners if you're interested.
Yeah.
Travis had made many trips back to the site, starting about 10 or 15 years after the events. And then gradually various film crews have gone back there as well with them. And it was actually the crew boss, Mike Rogers, who noticed one time in the middle of a snowstorm, actually, when they were trying to get to the location for a film crew, they couldn't find it. And they thought it was the snow that was detracting them. But then they realized that the trees in the area where the event had taken place were like a great bit larger than the surrounding trees. And trees usually grow uniformly. Like a group of trees, like 20 or 30 trees, just don't take off and grow 35% more very quickly for 15 years and then slow down again unless something unusual happened. And that they started to sample the trees and realized that the trees had grown in a circumference around where this craft had been. The trees grew 33% larger than the trees, 10 feet away from them. And what could cause that? Why? And doing some research, we actually learned that there are, from the Chernobyl incident, there were studies done out of a university in Poland that examined what's called the Scott pine trees, which is basically a cousin to the ponderosa pine tree. What they realized is these ponderosa pine trees I should say the Scott pines in the 5-mile radius around Chernobyl all grew at about a 33% growth rate for about 15 to 20 years after the Chernobyl incident. And it's believed that the radiation caused by that nuclear meltdown forces the pine tree to grow faster. It puts out a rapid amount of wood fiber at about at 33 times its normal growth rate. And it's pretty well documented. And we found the exact same percentage of growth rate in the ponderosa pine trees right around the incident. And not only did some of the trees grow bigger, but the most rapid form of growth was shown on one side of each of these trees. It was not uniformly around the entire circumference of the tree. It was only the side of the tree that faced where this UFO craft was. And I just found that stunning. It's like stunning evidence right there in the wood pulp. And
I would agree. That was pretty shocking and stunning to me as well. I was like, wow, okay. That was like another thing that just made this even more believable, to me.
Yeah.
Now, how do you do, what are some of the, I know that you guys also talked about that famous debunker. There's a difference between maybe people who are skeptics and people who are trying to just debunk the story. And I'm less interested in people who are trying to debunk it, but more of people who are maybe of the open-minded kind of skeptical community. What are some of their arguments about this? Like, do they feel, was it really a spacecraft or was it something within our military?
Travis's case has, it's quite famous. And so it was debunked for many, many years. And in fact, it is still debunked today. There are people that say, it really never happened. And, Travis was hiding out in a cabin and, the men just made up the story to get out of a contract. But when I read Travis's book, I realized that I needed to spend at least, 10 minutes in the film addressing this very famous debunker named Philip Klass, because that's really what he was. Although no one really identified him as a debunker while he was alive, he was just considered to be a scientific skeptic. He wrote for a prestigious magazine called Air and Space, and that was printed in Washington, D.C. And he kind of promoted himself as just being this, logical skeptic that really would, show the American public what they weren't looking at and show how the wool was being pulled over their eyes by these young boys. And he would never really look at the facts of anything connected to the story. He would just shoot from the hip and invent things that he thought up or dreamt up without any kind of proof. And that was kind of proven time and time again, because he came up with several different ideas about what he thought was going on and why this event happened. But, I think people need to be skeptical in that we do need to not be fooled by people. And there are, charlatans out there that will try to sell you all sorts of, various things. The old time phrase was a snake oil salesman, right? Who was coming around with snake oil that would cure all your ails and, make you, vibrantly well and let you live to 100. And so anyone who's considered to be, trying to sell you a bill of goods is sometimes called a snake oil salesman. But some of the best researchers in this field, like Stanton Friedman, actually went to the site and interviewed all of the people that he could and evaluated, Travis personally. This was long before there was evidence of tree growth that we could trace. And he wrote extensively about it, as well as J. Allen Hynek, who was involved in the Blue Book Project. There's actually a new program out now on, I think, the History Channel called Blue Book, and it's about the Blue Book Project. So I haven't watched the show yet. I'm sure they're changing some of the facts, but some of the best researchers in the field came out to this site in Arizona and spoke to Travis. And in spite of that, and in spite of their reports, and UFO research groups came out, this has been a highly contentious story ever since. And there are still people that, think it's a lot of bullshit. Excuse my French, if I'm allowed to say that on the air.
Yeah.
But, I don't. Having gotten to know Travis and gotten to know the men involved and actually gotten to interview the police, I realized that both the sheriff and the deputy that I interviewed asked me to turn off the camera at a certain point when, they said, when we're done, I'll tell you some other stuff. And I had to turn the camera off and pack it up and put the mics away so they knew we weren't recording them. Mm. And they told me of additional events that were even stranger than Travis's case that they had experienced over the period of time that they worked for the police force in Arizona. Wow. So I'm convinced that there are some unusual, things appearing in the sky, whether or not they're experimental military aircraft or some kind of secret space program that our government doesn't really talk about and our military doesn't talk about. Possibly it could be something like that, or possibly we could be visited by, another intelligent, species that is possibly using planet Earth as a stopping off point. Or maybe they're here mining minerals. We have a lot of rare earth minerals here. And we do have, fresh water and lots of hiding places for them and wonderful forest areas as well as underground. So that we could very well have other species living amongst us inside the earth or, in remote areas on the earth that we are unaware of. And most people will live and die their entire lives and never know it. Right. And that's the way they want it. These other intelligent species, I think, realize how barbaric we are And I don't think they really want to, involve themselves with our, politics or our governments or our leaders, because they just think we're fools and children, and like we're kids in the playground with atomic weapons, and they want to do anything they can to contain us, but they don't really want to engage with us. I think they're waiting for us to become a little more mature.
Right. Well, and, more and more information is out there. We had a really interesting guest on, Cheryl Costa.
Oh, yes. I love Cheryl.
Yeah. And she was really talking about, all of that data that she put together in the book, and, just the reportings out there of the UFO sightings, and how, the government has released documents and things of that sort. But you put a good section into the documentary too about why is this information just not coming out and being totally admitted by our government, and kind of what that could create, some mass hysteria, or, creating more fear within people and things of that sort. So
right. What would the government say?
Right.
We'd be keeping this a secret for 60 years.
Right.
People's heads would be on chopping blocks.
Exactly. Now, has anyone ever questioned whether or not and this might have been more of a question that I had for Peter Robbins, who was going to join us on the call, but we had a little bit of scheduling conflict, so we're sorry that he couldn't be here. But I know that he's a great researcher in all of this, and I know that he also helped you as the associate producer with researching some of the facts for your documentary. But, one of the questions I was thinking about asking him is, are these really alien abductions, or are these people just really experiencing an out-of-body state? And that might be more for the people who are experiencing or having an alien abduction in their home, in their bedroom at night. I'm not actually referring this to Travis Walton and the group of men where they experienced and all saw a craft, but just wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
Well, there's actually an incredibly wonderful new organization which has sprung up, and it's called FREE. It's the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Experiencers, or Extraterrestrial Experience. And they are actually collecting data. Now, it's somewhat subjective because people answer their own questions, but this questionnaire has gone out to well over, I think, 3,000 people who believe they are abductees, and they don't know each other, and they answer and fill out questionnaires. There's over 600 questions in the test, and the commonality of data is then organized into groups and sections, where some people have maybe more traumatic experiences, and other people have more like enlightening experiences where they're not traumatic at all, and they feel that they're given information and guided, and they're healed of certain physical ailments that they've had, and their lives are improved from the potential of this encounter, which they can't control, but happens at night or very, very early in the morning. So there's a wide range of experience that goes on in this realm. And if you go back and actually look at, say, ancient literature, you can actually find evidence of it in many cultures. I mean, I've been through many very interesting archives and libraries throughout Europe, looking at old books, and even looking at, say, the Christian literature. You'll come across drawings of these devil-like beings that show up with prods, and they have tails, or they have different-looking bodies. They have like maybe animal-like bodies, but they're standing up and acting and doing things like humans. And they maybe have red eyes or something like that, or big eyes. So it's right there, say, even in, Christian literature, but it's often referred to as the devil that has come to visit you. And then, then you try to protect yourself from this devil that comes in the night. So you can even find it in Vedic traditions, in Indian culture, and even in China and in Japan. You'll find similar things. So I think that, there really should be a more serious study given to this, and maybe within the halls of academia, that this is not just something people, make up as a nightmare. And we live in a world in the United States right now where we are entertained to death, right? And it's very hard to maybe have objectivity because we are so influenced by horror movies and things like this. But if you go back to an earlier time where those sorts of things were not really available, where did then these stories come from? When you didn't have a television you could turn on, or you didn't have a movie theater you could go to, there were only books and literature. And why in the deepest archives of spiritual tradition is there stories of these different states of consciousness and these different beings that come with good messages and with bad messages sometimes, or bad experiences and good experiences? So I think that's kind of a clue for any historian who wants to really study the abduction, phenomenon, to go back and look at literature around the world. I have a very good friend who his name is Danny Sheehan, and he is he went to Yale and became a priest, and then he also went to law school and ended up becoming the chief counsel for the Vatican for many years. He no longer holds that position, but he did for about 20, 25 years. And he got into Vatican archives and saw, many of these things I'm speaking of. And, he said there's good influences and there's bad influences, and they've always been there. And we just have to learn how to understand them and interpret them. And we're probably not alone in the universe, nor has our previous, humankind been alone. But I think that this group that has a potential to interact with us is diverse. Just as there are billions of potential, stars out there, there are hundreds of thousands of potential planets out there that are Earth-like, and the potential of life developing at an earlier time period than our own life has on planet Earth is hugely probable. And the potential that life and intelligence could travel here and interact with us is also huge. So, I think you can look at the glass half full or half empty on the abduction story, and you can look at the positive sides and the negative sides. But probably a lot of our spiritual traditions come out of contact in some way or another. Right. And it's interpreted as these religious traditions that we have from these experiences. And that's kind of a bold statement, maybe. I'm not saying all of our religious literature refers right back to what we're being told by aliens. No, we have to interpret it and understand it. But if a superior species shows up with superior technology and superior wisdom and tries to guide humanity at an earlier time in history, what is that going to be interpreted into? And that superior technology and superior intelligence really wants to remain obtruse, or they want to remain anonymous. They're not here physically walking around and engaging with our leaders openly. We don't see pictures of them in the newspaper. We don't see them on television. They don't want to be seen or known. They want to stay in the background, I think, because they want us to develop.
Right. Yeah, we also had another guest on that actually talked quite a bit about extraterrestrials in the Bible, Michael J.S. Carter. I don't know if you're familiar with his work.
I am familiar with him. He's
Yeah.
fabulous.
He really is. And he went into some of that with the religious texts. And I was like, wow, this is really interesting. Never thought about it that way, And so you're right. I mean, there's definitely stuff that suggests from, way before Hollywood started making these movies that there have been, messengers or people not of this body, that have been interacting with humans. So it's an amazing topic, right? It can make your head spin, and there's just so much, that's going into it, and research, and somebody who hasn't been really immersed in this UFO community, and it's more coming into my life and our work now here on the podcast, and the guests that we're bringing on. It does seem that maybe some more of this, I don't want to call it hidden research, but some of these stories that it's now coming out maybe even more for the mainstream. I don't know if sometimes that means that our consciousness is ready for that when more people begin to, when more people are reached, I guess, about this topic, as opposed to just having kind of these small little, communities of people that come together. But then you're really starting to branch out to people maybe who were avoiding to talk about this topic or really don't want to have any belief in it. But it feels to me that you can't really escape the topic of talking about this.
Yes. Yes, you're absolutely right. And April, that's been evidenced throughout history as well. I mean, when in the early, I would say 47 to certainly to 1952, there were massive ships seen around the country, Los Angeles, and even in the whole Roswell story. There was a story of a pilot who over the Cascade Mountains had a sighting, and he was an engineer and saw 9 crafts, flying and being an aeronautical engineer. He came home and reported this all to the local papers. And there was, front page news coverage for a number of years about UFOs. So people had it in their mindset and were really paying attention to it, until the government really tried to, make fun of people who reported UFOs. And then they came up with Project Blue Book, where there was a place people could send their reports to, so the government really didn't have to answer to them. And then eventually the government decided they're going to close Blue Book. But I'm agreeing with you that when things are in the mainstream, it makes more people wake up about certain topics. And certainly the UFO topic has been a difficult one to handle for certainly 50, 60, 70 years. Now, when MUFON launched a television show called Hangar One with I believe it was the History Channel, or maybe it was Discovery. I can't exactly remember which channel hosted it, but we got many, many more reports inside MUFON than we had prior to that television show being out there. And now, of course, with Ancient Aliens, people have become very curious about ancient history.
Right.
And the potential of aliens being here for a long period of time. I just went to a conference sponsored by Ancient Aliens in, it was in Baltimore. There were 5,000 people there.
Wow.
It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. So you're absolutely right. I mean, the television and the media has a way to educate in a positive way or a negative way. And it's really up to producers to, make that decision. Unfortunately, horror and, scarier things that are more unreal tend to sell better than things that are really true. But,
yeah, and that's a good point, too, because one of the things that I'm finding as I'm talking to more and more people about extraterrestrials is that I think that there's been, fear and it's been sensationalized, but, even Travis had said that, they're here to help, and possibly in his case to save his life.
Right.
And, and I think if people can begin to do some of this research with more of that open mind, that they are here to help and remind us to take care of our earth, and that if there is intervention, it's more for peace, for humanity than, what Hollywood has kind of showed us where, they're going to, abduct us and do experiments on us, and they're just trying to figure us out and, harm us. It's just, I don't believe that's what's going on here.
Right. I mean, they may be literally monitoring the amount of pollutants or lead or things like that are in our blood, and what we are doing to the environment and how it's affecting our species.
Right.
It could be as something simple as that, or they could be doing some sort of genetic interbreeding. It's very hard for us to completely know. Or there's probably a variety of agendas that are present, and that we've just been, we've seen the teeny tippy edge of it from what we can remember in our consciousness and from what we see with craft, on the ground or around in the air. They may be literally doing air quality testing of what kind of metal, particulates are in our atmosphere.
Yeah, I don't know. Who knows? But it is fascinating. I think you did a wonderful job. Can you let our listeners know where they can find your documentary to watch?
Sure. It's they can go to my website for the film, which is easy to remember. It's TravisWaltonTheMovie.com. That's the main website for the film. And they can't see the film there, but they can buy a DVD. If they want to just stream it, they can see it at Amazon. If they go to Amazon and Google Travis Walton, the true story of Travis Walton, or I think the proper title is Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. They can find it on Amazon. And shortly, it will also be out on some other streaming platforms. We're not exactly sure whether it's Netflix or Hulu or Vimeo, but we're actually releasing it with a new title called Alien Abduction, because a film that starts with the letter A usually appears in the top of the list, and films like that do 80% better just because they start with the letter A. So we are also, releasing it with a different title, so they can hunt for it there. Travis Walton himself has it on his website, so that's TravisWalton.com. You can go there and also buy a DVD or the book from Travis and actually read the book as well.
Yeah, and I know that your film has won so many awards, and after watching it, I totally see why. I mean, just even from a filmmaker's perspective, it was extremely well done. Your research was wonderful. The people that you interviewed, getting the testimonials, covering both ends of the spectrum of, the skeptical and the debunkers, but also, kind of having some of that data with the polygraphs. I mean, you did a great job, I think, for both sides, for people who are true believers and true skeptics. I think this documentary is going to leave, both sides just kind of wondering a little bit more. So congratulations on this. I really loved it and enjoyed it, and I'm glad that it came across my way. So thanks for being a guest here.
Thank you so much for having me on the air. I'm happy to come back again with Peter at another time. And Peter would be a great interview for you as well. And he's right up in your area. So,
okay. Yeah, we'll definitely try to do that.
Great. Thank you, April,
thanks, Jennifer.
very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Path 11 podcast today. I hope you all enjoyed this show. And if you haven't checked out our Patreon page, I'd like you to do so, because we are going to start putting some content over there that is only for our Patreon subscribers. You can get content for as little as donating $1 a month, and it could just be a one-time donation. We have other freebies over there that you can get depending upon how much you would like to donate. And again, it could be a one-time donation, or you can continue to keep your subscription on a monthly basis at that donation level. But I just put my MBT immersive experience, which was a four-day intensive meditation training in Tennessee with physicist Tom Campbell. I was listening to binaural beats, going to altered states of consciousness, having out-of-body experiences and life-changing experiences that I was able to bring back for myself, for my clients, for my friends. That was just out of this world. So if you would like to listen to that, I'd like you to head on over to path11podcast.com. You're going to see an orange button that says Patreon. Become a Patreon today, and you can have access to that podcast. And I would like to remind you to head on over to path11productions.com and check out the membership that we have for the Afterlife Awareness Conference. We have over 25 hours of footage with amazing speakers like William Buhlman, Thomas John, Terry Daniel, Suzanne Geisman, Suzanne Northrup, Linda Fitch, Austin Wells, just a few people to name off that were amazing. These workshops are just so valuable. So I think that you would really enjoy it. It's also a great thing to think about to maybe give the gift to somebody who is struggling with grief. If you are looking for resources, this is a great conference to send people to check out. And thanks again for listening today.